Good afternoon. An interesting event took place in a small New England village in 1794. At the time, almost no one thought that much about it, yet it launched a series of actions that drew workers and skilled craftsmen from all over America and led to the creation of one of the most dynamic centers of invention in the United States. That event was the founding of the U.S. Armory here in Springfield, Massachusetts. But why was this historic event, rarely mentioned in our history books, so important? And why is it valuable for us to study this event today? It is my belief that Springfield, a hotbed of creative activity during the Industrial Revolution, is worth a thorough study now for two reasons. First, we have here in America, we're very interested in how we can revive our urban landscape, our urban centers, how we can bring new life to depressed areas, and how we can spark new business activity in our cities. Secondly, we today are very concerned about finding ways to spur creativity and new technological ideas in a world where the next successful product can create jobs and wealth. Springfield, in the golden era of the Industrial Revolution, was creating new inventions and new products at an unprecedented rate. It was creating new jobs and new business opportunities faster than they could be filled. It was an industrial era Silicon Valley. We can't help but ask ourselves today, how can we recreate that kind of environment now? Let's take a look at what happened at that time. General Henry Knox, Secretary of War under President George Washington, was looking for a suitable place to establish an armory to make muskets for the U.S. military. He couldn't place his new facility too close to the coast because the coast was vulnerable to attack by foreign navies. Springfield provided the perfect compromise. It was far enough inland to be safe from naval attack, but it was on the Connecticut River, a river that guns could be shipped down to the coast and then sent out to where they were needed. Within just a few decades, the armory developed into a research facility to develop new firearms for the military. And as we are all aware of now, technological changes from one industry are often applied to other types of manufacturing, which is called technology transfer. And it was happening here 200 years ago. The armory, with its large workforce, acted as a magnet to attract a variety of skilled laborers into the area. These skilled workers soon made the Springfield region famous for quality firearms. But the impact of this highly skilled workforce went well beyond the gun industry. Many of the mechanically inclined people who came to work in the gun industry soon came up with ideas in other areas of manufacturing. For example, David Ames, the first superintendent of the Armory, left that job in 1802 and established a paper mill in the city. The reason he left the Armory and went into a new business was that he had an idea for developing a cylinder machine for pressing paper. The new paper-making process made the Ames mills one of the leaders in the first half of the 19th century. Another example of the same sequence is the story of Thomas Blanchard. He came to work at the Armory in the 1820s, and while here developed the now famous Blanchard lathe, a machine capable of turning irregular forms in order to make the manufacturing process much smoother and easier. This lathe, which can still be seen at the Armory Museum in downtown Springfield today, proved to have many applications in other industries. Basically, any manufacturing process which required an object to be turned benefited from Blanchard's invention. But Blanchard didn't stop there. He too left the Armory and in the late 1820s made significant improvements in steamboat design and started a successful passenger and freight shipping company on the Connecticut River. These two stories of these two men reflect a bigger pattern. Highly skilled and inventive people were attracted to Springfield's existing industry. Once they got here, these creative entrepreneurs went on to invent new products and found new industries. Springfield quickly grew into a diversified industrial city. And it's important to remember that this was the exception to the rule in that era of the 19th century. Most 19th century industrial cities were dominated by one industry. For example, Lowell, Massachusetts is a good example. It developed a thriving textile industry and was known for that and that alone. Springfield was different. Although the gun industry was the largest Springfield industry for most of the 19th century, by the 1870s and the 1880s, there were a number of other manufacturers in a variety of other fields. In fact, the diversity of Springfield manufacturing was really astounding in this time period. G&C Merriam made one of the famous dictionaries in history. Wasson Manufacturing Company was the largest maker of railroad cars in the world. Milton Bradley was the leading board game manufacturer in the U.S. Indian Motorcycle was the largest maker of motorcycles in the world, and you can see those in the Springfield museums downtown. Barney and Berry made one of the most popular ice skates in the Victorian era. Bemis and Call invented the monkey wrench and was one of the largest tool makers in the country. Chapman Valve made some of the largest industrial valves in the era. Blair made one of the earliest push lawnmowers available in America. Fisk Company was one of the first companies to make tires, later became Uniroyal. Springfield also claimed two of the country's largest insurance companies, Mass Mutual, where we're here today, and Springfield Fire and Marine Insurance Company, which in the 19th century was one of the nation's top 10 companies in that category. This is by no means a complete list of the companies in Springfield. I'm just mentioning the ones that were the largest. There were many other companies. These companies would never have made it off the ground, and it certainly wouldn't have become a major manufacturing facility here in Springfield without the supportive environment and a skilled workforce existing in Springfield. But we haven't even talked about the most important invention to originate in Springfield, and it's a perfect example of the same pattern that we've already seen. In 1890, Charles and Frank Duryea, originally from Illinois, came to Springfield to work on bicycles for the Ames Manufacturing Company in Chicopee. Ames was one of the many gun makers in the area, but this time they had branched into other products, including bicycles. While working at Ames, the Duryea brothers began to explore the technological challenge that so many across the country were working on at that time: how to develop a successful gasoline-powered horseless carriage. After a number of experiments and adjustments to their design, on September 21st, 1893, the Duryea brothers drove on the streets of Springfield the first successful automobile in America. No, it wasn't Henry Ford. It was the Duryea brothers. Thus, the creative environment existing in Springfield at the time launched the American automotive industry. And for some 3 decades, Springfield rivaled Detroit as a hub of the car industry. In addition to Duryea, 2 very successful brands, Knox and Atlas, made some of the finest cars in America in the 20th century. In the 1920s, the British car maker Rolls-Royce set up a plant in Springfield to make luxury cars for the American market and continued that operation until the stock market crash of 1929. And at the Springfield Museum, you can see 2 Springfield-made Rolls-Royces. The reason they chose Springfield was, again, the skilled workforce. But that's not the whole story. There's one more factor that we must investigate in order to understand the phenomenon that led to such an innovative environment in Springfield, and that factor is urban density. Anyone studying Springfield in this era will quickly see that Springfield was an extremely compact urban space with a population density much greater than most American cities today. Springfield was also a city with an amazing mix of different ethnic groups. Between 1850 and 1930, some 35 million people immigrated to America from all over the world. Springfield's industry attracted thousands of these new Americans to its factories and businesses, and they in turn gave their creative ideas back to the city. Fostering this interchange of ideas between people of so many different backgrounds were the densely packed urban neighborhoods where everyone lived and worked in close proximity. By 1900, when the city reached the peak of its innovative production, the city fanned out in a half-moon shape against the river, with the population clustered in neighborhoods all within 3 miles of downtown. Factories, retail stores, and residential housing were all very, very close. Smith & Wesson, Milton Bradley, Mass Mutual, all the city's banks, and the city's 3 large department stores were all within 6 blocks of one another. The idea of the isolated industrial park kept away from other parts of the city, or the zoning restrictions we deal with today that separate retail districts from residential neighborhoods was a phenomenon far in the future. Back then, Springfield industry, retail shops, and residential housing were all mixed in an intricate web of activity. Why is this important? Over the last 30 to 50 years, as American cities have declined and industry has stagnated, many historians, urban planners, sociologists, and others have initiated a number of studies to identify what conditions bring about innovation. What these scholars have found is that urban density, where people are constantly coming in contact with a diverse range of other people who have different backgrounds, different professions, different perspectives, produce an effect that often leads to new creative ideas. These studies have confirmed time and time again that creative industries tend to cluster together and share ideas. And this can best be facilitated by encouraging urban density. Richard Florida, one of the most important scholars in this field, recently stated in an Atlantic magazine article that cities especially matter in channeling the contributions of creative workers into actual innovations. It is no accident that today New York and San Francisco, the two American cities with the highest population density in the U.S., are among the most diverse and are among the two leading centers of creative activity in the country. Suburbanization, a trend that picked up steam after World War II, spread out the American population and greatly decreased urban density in our metropolitan regions. Many businesses soon followed and moved out of the centers. Mass Mutual is a perfect example. The company was located right in the heart of downtown Springfield until well into the 20th century. They moved to their present location, right here where we are today, on what was then the outskirts of Springfield in 1926. Smith & Wesson, located in the downtown area for almost 100 years, followed suit in 1947, and they relocated to an isolated tract of land in the eastern part of the city. Many other corporations, too numerous to mention, have taken the same course and are now in isolated suburban industrial parks. In the 1950s and 1960s, the suburbanizing process seemed like a good idea, but in retrospect, it may have contributed to a decline in American creativity. Also, the building of the American highway system often slashed right through urban downtowns, which happened in Springfield in the late 1960s, and you can see that in the photograph. By spreading people out over large areas and thus decreasing their interaction with people from different backgrounds, we may have inadvertently decreased innovative ideas at the very time that we needed them the most. Europe and Asia, the sectors of the world that we are now competing with most directly, didn't create suburban sprawl to half the extent that we did in this country. To make matters worse, European and Asian cities are now thriving as never before. We in this country must now ask fundamental questions about how we should re-engineer our urban centers to foster creativity in the 21st century. The good news is that there are very positive signs on the horizon. There is a growing movement on a variety of fronts to re-energize our cities and to create a healthy mix of business, industry, and housing in close proximity. This should not only help us revive our urban cores, but should bring about an atmosphere that sparks creative innovation. There is also a growing realization that the United States continues to draw creative people from all points of the globe, and the imperative to develop rational policies to benefit and thrive from the entrepreneurial drive of these new groups should be a theme we all take very seriously. Studying a city like Springfield between 1860 and 1930 provides an excellent model for how we might go about this process. Thank you very much.